My name is Paul DeFucia, as you probably already know. And as you may or may not know, I was one of 3 million people in Kraków, Poland this past month for World Youth Day 2016. World Youth Day is a festival of Catholic youth held every 3 years or so. And the Pope is there, and we're just celebrating our Catholic faith, and it's awesome. I know, because I was there. So I wanted to I wanted to make this video because there wasn't enough time to tell everybody all about it. I mean, this life is really busy now, and I wanted just like if I was going to sit down and talk to people about it, I wouldn't really be satisfied unless it was like a 2-hour conversation over coffee or something like that. So I decided to make this video because I don't have time to talk to everybody, unfortunately, for 2 hours about World Youth Day. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam. So the first place we went was Prague. And Prague was my first taste of Europe, and I really loved it. I mean, I was used to, coming from America, I can tell you that every one of the 30 houses on my street is pretty much the same, designed pretty much the same way. And the architecture was one of the first things that popped out at me about Prague, was because it was beautiful. That's the only way to describe it. We'd be walking down streets and I'd just be taking pictures, panoramas of the buildings, because like one was pink, and they were like, and that pink one was sandwiched in between 2 other huge, magnificent buildings. We ate dinner in a town hall at like a centuries-old opera house one night. So that was one of the first things that jumped out to me about Prague. We went to a lot of places in Prague. We went on a driving tour right after we got off the plane, and a walking tour the next day. First of all, we went to the Loretto Church in Prague, which is really old and is actually, we saw it more as a museum of sorts than a church, although of course that was certainly an important part of it. The Loretto Church has a lot of things. It has a lot of old statues. We saw actually 2 statues of the only female saint with a beard. So there's your Catholic trivia today. Saint Wilgefortis is the only female saint with a beard. We saw 2 statues of her actually. And we also walked through, briefly, the Santa Casa, which is a replica of the house of Jesus and Mary, and it's believed to be the place where the incarnation took place. Annunciation, all that stuff. So that was pretty cool. That building is covered with carvings all over. I didn't take pictures at Loretto, unfortunately, because you had to pay to take pictures, and it would totally have been worth it, but I didn't have any check money yet. But what else did we see? We saw like the coolest treasury I've ever seen was there. We saw the most ornamented monstrance in the world. It's called the Diamond Monstrance, because it has 6,222 diamonds on it. It's incredible. And it's locked up and kept safely away, but it's beautiful. And that was in a treasury with a bunch of other centuries-old monstrances that were just gorgeous. I loved looking at those. The monstrances were awesome. So yeah, that was the Loretto Church. That was only one of the amazing churches we went to. My favorite one in Prague actually was Our Lady of the Snows. That was the first church we went to after landing in Prague, and we had a private mass said there. We had mass every day on this trip. That was a huge blessing, and we had a bishop with us, which made it easier to get a mass said, because all he had to do was walk into the sacristy, say, "I'm a bishop, I need to say mass," and there you go, you had mass. Anyways, Bishop Serba from Duluth celebrated mass with just our group, 85 of us, and I served in this this bright orange shirt, but still, it was an incredible blessing to serve Our Lady of the Snows. The altar there is the oldest in Prague. It dates back to, I think the date is 1659, so this is a 350-year-old altar. By contrast, one of the oldest churches in our area, which is actually not far from my house, is 200 years younger than Our Lady of the Snows, or at least its altar. that was a beautiful little church. We sang the Salve after Mass, and it was just amazing. That was a great first taste of Europe and of the trip. We also went to Our Lady of Victory, which is the place where where the Infant of Prague statue is. The Infant of Prague is a very famous statue that's known to that has caused a lot of miracles in the past, and there are thousands of replicas all over the world of the Infant of Prague. We also went to St. Vitus. St. Vitus is the Gothic cathedral. It is almost 1,000 years old. So like take Our Lady of the Snows, which is 350 years old, and you have St. Vitus, which is almost 1,000 years old. There was one entrance that we went to. We didn't go into it, but we went right around it. I think it dated back to 11 or 1200, 12th or 13th century. That was insane. There's a mosaic over there that dates back like 800 years ago. So it was incredible. The Gothic church is much different in style than any of the churches that in America. It was just like tall arches and huge columns. It was incredible to be a part of. I'm going to say that a lot. A lot of it was incredible to be a part of. Let's see, where else did we go? Wenceslas Square. So those four churches were the only churches we visited in Prague, but that's a lot for 2 days. Anyway, Wenceslas Square was my favorite public square in Prague. It's a lot smaller and a lot less busier than Times Square in New York, which I've also visited, but I liked it better because of the history that surrounded it. It was an important place in the history of Prague when the Nazis and communists took over. There actually is a monument there to 2 college students who burned themselves publicly in Wenceslas Square to protest the Nazi and communist oppression there. Wenceslas Square. There also is a huge statue of Saint Wenceslas in Wenceslas Square, hence the name. Saint Wenceslas is actually, I didn't know this, but he's actually a huge deal in Prague. He was a Czech saint who was a prince of Prague. And his statue is in Wenceslas Square, as I said. There's actually a colloquial expression. If you say you're going to meet with somebody under the tail, it means you're going to meet them behind the statue under the tail of his horse. I thought that was interesting. Another place we went to in Prague, we went to a lot of great places in Prague, was the Charles Bridge. The Charles Bridge was probably my favorite bridge I've ever crossed. Because, well, first of all, it's hundreds of years old, and it's just lined with statues of the saints and crucifixes and all that stuff. I wish I had taken more pictures, frankly, because it was incredible to just walk down and be looking both sides, like, oh, there's a statue of the crucifixion, and there's a statue of St. John of Nepomuk. St. John of Nepomuk is another Czech saint. You may have heard him before as lame as I knew it was St. John Nepomucene. He was thrown off a bridge by the king for various political reasons. And he's a Czech martyr and saint, and he's also a big deal in Prague. These Prague people are pretty diehard about their saints, even though there aren't a whole lot of them. Maybe that's why. So we ate in Prague, like most people do. We went to one of the most interesting places we went to is a Czech restaurant, authentic Czech cuisine, not a pizzeria where we went or whatever. We went to this Czech restaurant, and the way it worked was that the Czech waitress didn't speak very good English. We had 4 dishes. I forget what one of them was called, but we also had duck pate. Duck pate was interesting, most memorable dish we had in Prague. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I will get to the most memorable one later. The most memorable for the wrong reason. That was what duck pate was, because it was just weird. Like the texture and the taste were odd. We also had a pork knee. That one was the one that was hardest to get to across the waitress, and she was actually motioning to her own knee to make sure we got the point, make sure she got the point. But pork knee was actually really good. It had a lot more meat on it than I thought, because my knee doesn't have a lot of meat on it. But the pigs apparently do have a lot of meat on their knee. We also had goulash, and that was really good. So we had a pretty good dinner overall at the Czech cuisine, at the Czech restaurant, excuse me. Besides the duck pate, perhaps. But then we went to a turdelnik shop. Turdelnik is the Czech dessert. It's the Prague dessert, and it is one of the best things I've ever eaten. One of the best foods there is out there. What they do is they take dough, they take like bread dough, and they roll it around a stick, and then they roast that stick over charcoal. And so they roast the stick over charcoal, so it's pretty golden brown. Then they roll that in sugar and walnut. And then what they had at this shop was the option to line the inside with Nutella. So I was like, how can you not do that with Nutella? So we line the inside with Nutella in. Then they put strawberries in there and then dashed off with some whipped cream and chocolate syrup at the top. Not a lot of chocolate syrup, just a little bit to make it interesting. So anyway, that was just that was incredible. It's hard to have words for it. It's one of the things on the trip that I don't have words to explain. There are other things, don't worry, that are better than turdelnik, but still, that was one of the best foods I ate on the trip. Probably had a ton of calories and sugar, but it was worth it.